India has assumed the presidency of the Intergovernmental Forum G20. Indonesia, the former G20 president nation, transferred the website g20.org to New Delhi. That reads now Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the One Earth, One Family, One Future, the theme of G20 this year. Several events have been planned across the country to mark India's G20 presidency. These include University Connect, illumination of 100 monuments across the country, including UNESCO World Heritage Sites with the G20 logo to mark the occasion for 7 days from 1st to 7 December. Hailing the formal transfer of presidency, Prime Minister Narendra Modi penned an article in which he said India's G20 presidency will work to promote the universal sense of oneness, highlighting the significant results delivered by the earlier 17 presidencies of G20. Prime Minister Modi said India can catalyze a fundamental mindset shift to benefit humanity as a whole. Earlier this month, the Prime Minister unveiled the logo, theme and website of India's G20 presidency via video conferencing. The lotus in the logo symbolizes India's ancient heritage, faith and thought. He emphasized that this G20 logo and theme represent many key messages from India. It shows the message of Buddha for freedom from war, Mahatma Gandhi's solutions in the face of violence, and through G20, India is giving these messages a new height. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was handed over the presidency of G20 by Indonesian President Joko Widodo after the 17th meeting of G20 leaders in Bali this November. In order to discuss the significance of India's presidency of G20, we have with us the G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, as India has assumed the presidency of G20, what is the significance and the underlying message for the global community, sir?
This is a very important role as the presidency of G20 because G20 countries account for almost 85% of the global GDP. They account for about 75% of the trade. They account for almost 90% of the global patents, and they account for almost 65% of the global population. So G20 countries are very, very significant. They are very important. They drive the global economy. And what is decided in G20 really shapes the future of the world. This is a very, very important presidency year because there are global conflicts right now. There is a huge amount of restructuring of the global supply chains. There is global debt, which is at an all-time high. And therefore, the challenges before the G20 are to accelerate the pace of inclusive and sustainable growth. There is a challenge of ensuring that there is climate action and that there is an adequate amount of flow of climate financing to emerging markets and developing countries. There's also the challenge of using technology to leapfrog, and how do we accelerate the pace of this technology acceleration across all countries. And also, due to COVID, a vast number of people across the world were left behind in education, health, nutrition, and therefore accelerating the pace of sustainable development goals will also be a key challenge.
Sir, you have emphasized in the past the need for all G20 member nations to selectively address health, food and energy security challenges in an urgent, cooperative and equitable manner. And it will be a challenging task to obtain cooperation from all. How do you plan to undertake this challenge?
So this is a key challenge both on issues of digital health, on issues of ensuring that the world works together as far as health outcomes are concerned. There's also the challenge of education outcomes which have got impacted. There's also the challenge of nutrition. And there's also a challenge of cooperating across the world because you also have to ensure that the whole world is vaccinated, that the world does not face another pandemic in the future. There is also the challenge of ensuring that preventive care is taken. And all these are challenges which will be discussed, and the pace of acceleration will be strengthened so that there is adequate taking care of the population of the world. That is G20's challenge. The challenge is not merely on the health side, but accelerating the pace of the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Because if the world has to go forward, if the world has to grow and expand, it has to be inclusive and equitable growth. India has been saying that it has to be sustainable, but it has to be inclusive, it has to be equitable. And this growth needs to be accelerated by all countries of the world. Now, this would require a vast amount of financing along with climate financing. And therefore, climate financing and financing for SDG holds really the key to growth of the future.
Sir, you spoke about climate financing and financing for the goals related to SDG. Yet another important factor has been in terms of the financial regulations. How India will be eyeing to address the methods to boost its digital economy and improve the cross-border financial or transitional transparency, and that too when we are looking at a $5 trillion economy in the years to come.
So India provides a huge learning lesson because it has ensured that it builds up digital public goods. It has ensured that there's digital identification of all its population. 1.4 billion people have digital identity. It has ensured consent-based digitization, and therefore everybody gives consent. And thirdly, it has ensured fast payments. What India has demonstrated is that through open source, open architecture, it has been able to build up strong APIs. And this has led to very, very strong movement forward as far as both identification, as far as digital payments through UPI, as far as several other apps like DigiLocker, CoWIN, many other are concerned. And therefore, what India has demonstrated to the world is that you can use digitization to leapfrog. And therefore, India provides a unique opportunity through digital public goods, where the public good is the track which is owned by the government, on top of which the private sector innovates. So India is the only country in the world where PhonePe competes with Google Pay, where WhatsApp competes with Paytm. And therefore, our belief is that the trunk infrastructure must be created by the government, and on top of which we should allow private sector to innovate. What India has achieved in the last 6 to 7 years would have normally taken India about 60 to 70 years. But India has really accelerated the pace of digital transformation. This is a lesson for many other countries of the world. And we need to bring what we have done to the knowledge of the world, that this is possible to technologically leapfrog, and that the data being owned by big tech, we need data to be owned by individuals, and that consent is critical, and that digital identification is required, and almost 3 billion people across the world need digital identification. So these are huge lessons which the Indian narrative brings out. And during our presidency, we'll use this opportunity to spell out the Indian narrative in many of these things.
Sir, India's G20 presidency comes at a time when the world is facing multiple challenges, be it the Russia-Ukraine war, the China-Taiwan crisis, the global supply chain disruptions, trade slowdowns, high global debt, as you have pointed out earlier, not to forget the inflationary pressures and the impending recession. So what will be the priority areas at G20?
The priority area, first and foremost, as you have mentioned, many of the challenges, has to be to accelerate the pace of inclusive, equitable and sustainable growth. Secondly, it's very important to ensure that there is fair and just climate financing, which the developed world was committed to. And thirdly, to ensure that there is acceleration in the implementation of SDG. And there are many other Indian narratives, like lifestyle for sustainability, changing how do you change individuals' lifestyle so that there is climate action. There is many other agenda for the world, like green hydrogen, like digital public goods. All these are critical for the global economy to have energy transition and for the world pace of growth to accelerate in the coming years. All these will be brought center stage during our presidency.
So, India's G20 priorities are being firmed up with previous conversations that revolve around sustainable growth and the lifestyle for environment or life, as spelled out by the Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi. He has been very vocal about life. How much or less this we are going to see to be discussed about lifestyle for environment in the G20 summit under India's presidency?
Lifestyle for environment, life will be center stage. It will be one of the key priorities of the government, the key priority for India, because we strongly believe that the developed world is talking about 2050 and it has fixed up long-term goals, whereas we need individual movement forward and we need actually annual action plans which will be based on individual transformation. There's a lot of wastage in the world. There's a lot of changing of lifestyle required. All this is necessary because only with change of lifestyles, when individuals take ownership, then only there'll be a change in terms of climate adaptation and mitigation. And therefore, India truly believes that lifestyle for environment will be a very critical agenda in its G20 presidency. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Well, listeners, that was Sri Amitabh Kant, G20 Sherpa, sharing insights into the G20 summit scheduled to be held in India next year. Thanks for joining with us, sir, and sharing your valuable time with All India Radio.
Thank you.